Okay guys, so let's talk about service workers. So in this video we are going to cover what is a service worker? Why are they so powerful, and when do I use them, and why? Why would you use a service worker? So let's get into it. So a service worker is basically just a file that you include in your project and that you register in the browser. And what it allows you to do is that it allows you to control the network between, or rather the interaction between the network and the user's browser. So think of it as a very advanced caching strategy, so that you can decide what files you want to save on the user's computer and what files you want to go to the network or to the server to get, or what data. It doesn't have to be files, it can be basically anything. So why is this so powerful? Well, if you think about it, if you have a way for you to decide what files should be fetched from the network, from the internet basically, and what files are just going to be loaded from the user's own file system, you have the power to make an entire web page offline. And if you can make an entire web page offline, how cool is that? Like, honestly, how cool is that? You can basically build web applications that work as native applications. So what's at least from my perspective even more powerful about this is that when you have control of the network and you can actually decide when to get new data and when just to use the data that you have saved on the user's file system, tools such as React and tools such as Angular and Vue, and they are still relevant to a point, but they become it's almost not even worth it. It depends, of course, because they have a lot of other stuff going for them, but one of the main benefits of having these SPA frameworks is that you have a native feel and a native touch to things. Things feel native to the user when they're using the browser. But with a service worker, you can actually achieve the same thing. So one of the limitations with service workers is that you can only run service workers on the HTTPS protocol, and the reason for this is actually very good. Imagine that somebody compromised a network. Let's say that they were somehow able to do something, I don't know, called a man-in-the-middle attack. We are not going to talk about that, but something that allows them to just put a service worker on your file system. If they were to able to do that, they would be able to control that web page for you for the rest of so as long as that service worker is there. So that's very dangerous. That's why we need to do it over HTTPS, so that at least it makes it a little bit harder for hackers to actually do this. It's still possible, but hey, that's the way, unfortunately, that's the world we live in. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, let's just walk through the basic setup here. We have a server that's listening on port 3000. We have this little index file here, which is basically just our server. It's an Express server. And all we have is a few notifications and a utility function. That's all it really does, is that it helps me declare a file name that references this folder over here, the public folder. And then we have the Express Static middleware that serves up static content from the public directory. So when we go to the root of our of the URL, we are going to serve up index.html, and if we do /foo, we get the foo HTML, /bar HTML, and finally we have the /notifications endpoint that is going to simply show us the JSON, which is all of this stuff over here, right? Okay, that's our entire application. So let's have a look at our HTML for the index file here, which is going to be our root. So first and foremost, we have a style sheet. This little style sheet here. It's a very basic style sheet with some basic colors and a background. And then we have something called a snack bar and some snack bar show thing here. The CSS isn't all that important. We'll just gloss over that for now. And then we have our body with an h1 of notifications, some links, a UL, and a div of some sort. All this awesome stuff. But this is the part that we really care about, this part right here. So if service worker in Navigator. So we look at the Navigator object and we check if there is something called a service worker. So if it is, we simply add an event listener for when the page has loaded. Once the page has loaded, we basically register a service worker by doing this. Service worker.register sv.js, which is this file down here. We'll talk about that in just a moment, and then we simply log out that, hey, we successfully register our service worker. And down here we have a import of some regular old JavaScript. Let's look at the service worker. This is all a service worker, like this is the bare bone basics of what a service worker can do for you. So we have something called a cache name, whatever that is, and then we have some URLs to cache. So basically what's happening here is that the cache name, this thing here, is just a convention type of thing. You don't have to have this. Remember that the service worker's power comes from your ability to cache assets on the file system. I'll show you exactly how this works in just a moment, but think of this cache name here. It could be any string. It's just me, basically something that I decided that, okay, this is the name of my cache. This is where I'm going to store all the user's assets. And you can, if you wanted to remove that or update it in some way, you can simply change the version of the cache. Easy peasy. So you can cache one set of assets, and then when you have an updated service worker and maybe you want to bust the cache, you just create another version of the cache name, and hey, the browser is going to store that information in another cache. And what's this? URLs to cache. Well, here you declare all of the URLs that the browser is going to access where you want to save the content, or rather the response from that URL when you're on the network. So here I've basically declared all the stuff that I want to be saved in the user's cache. And then we do self-add event listener for install, and this is just to kind of illustrate and start caching things. So basically what's happening here is that when the service worker is loaded, it's going to be installed, quote unquote, on your user's file system, and it's going to, when it's done, it's going to run this install event. Once the service worker is installed on the file system, we will simply open the cache that we want with this cache name here, and then we will just add all of these URLs to the cache, so that when we get these assets, when we go to the network for the first time and get all of these resources, we will save them in the cache. And the next time the user tries to go to that URL, we will simply go to the cache and get them. Or rather, well, that's not what's going to happen by default, but that's the idea anyway. What's actually going to happen is down here. So here we are, event.responsewith. So basically what I'm doing here is that when we do a fetch, this is just an event that is going to happen when we go to the network. When the user tries to load an asset that is on the internet, we are going to be able to hook into that event. So what we do now is that we do caches.match event.request, and the request is going to be the URL. So if it matches any of these things up here, that's when we are going to run this asynchronous operation with the response. And basically, if there is a response, then simply return that response. If there is no response, then we call the fetch function, which is just a global AJAX. Probably you know the fetch function since before. It's just the standard way these days to do AJAX and actually go to the network. So what's happening here is that if we find if the event.request object, this string here, matches any of these URLs that we have with the data that we have stored from previous network calls in our cache, we will simply return the cached content. It can be in this case, it could be main.js. We could have saved this file on the user's browser, but we could also have saved whatever comes back from, say, notifications. As we saw in the server earlier, notifications is going to return JSON, so it could have been JSON that we were responding with. So with this little function here, we now control every single network request the browser makes, which is extremely powerful. So let's just look at what's actually happening here. So here we have our web page. Let's actually remove offline mode, and let's do a hard refresh. So now, whenever we go to the network, let's just look at the network tab here. So I refresh, and as we can see here, the initiator is going to show me where all of this is, like basically where we're loading everything from. So we see that we go to the network and we transfer some data from, and we get the main CSS file, the main JS file, the notifications, and this is just an arbitrary file. This is my browser, don't ignore this. These are the important things. So if I now refresh again, notice that the size has been changed. So now we are loading all of this content from the service worker, from the service worker, from the service worker, from the service worker. So we never went to the network to get any of this information. Cached assets such as CSS files and JavaScript files, I mean, this is old hat. We've been doing this for a long time. But this is different. And the same thing goes for the HTML. Well, you could cache HTML as well, but for the most part you wouldn't. But this stuff is unique. This JSON that we got from the server is now being loaded from the service worker or from the cache thanks to the service worker. And what this allows us to do is to go to this application. I use Chrome. It might be different if you're using some of the other browsers, but if you are, you're not as cool as the Chrome users, because Chrome is awesome. Sorry, I'm a little bit opinionated there. Let's say that I wanted to make this an offline experience. And I click this button here. The network is now no longer there. And if I refresh this, it still works. And the reason why it still works is because of what's going on here. As you can see, we are in offline mode. If I do a hard refresh, nothing works because now I have no files anymore. But if I just do a regular refresh, hey, all my files are being loaded from the service worker because they're stored in the service worker. If you don't believe me, let's have a look at the cached storage. Let's look at this. This is my site cache yada 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 for localhost 3000, and as you can see here, I actually have an index of all the information that has been stored in my cache. Here is all the data. I could remove this if I wanted to manually as a user, but there wouldn't be any reason for me to do so. So what's happening is that now the network is optional. How cool is that? We can run an offline application. And if you think about it, the first time the user hits your server and downloads your application, you can store everything that doesn't have to be absolutely fresh. And then the next time the user refreshes or visits your page, you can load the whole application instantly. And the pattern you can see here is that what I have is just this very basic little application. Let's just close this, which is just, imagine this was a notification flow, something like push notifications or whatever, and you had this information, or say your Twitter feed. Now, if you refresh or you hit the server, basically what you could do, I honestly think that this is going to become a trend very soon, where you go to the page, it loads absolutely instantly, and it shows you all of the notifications that you saw last time you visited the web page, and then it's most likely going to try and go to the network. If it finds a network, let's say that you're not in offline mode, but you're actually online, the web page is going to go to the server and check, hey, are there any new notifications, and show you something like this. You can actually see that, oh, there's no new messages. Let's actually load those in. Now, nothing's going to happen because I haven't really implemented anything like that. I'll show you the JavaScript in just a moment. But if you just follow me in my thought, how powerful is that? That you can show something instantaneously. The application is working immediately, and then you can actually just tell the user if there are new changes. And then you can go to the network, because you don't have to go to the network to give the user the value of using the application. And I was talking earlier about SPAs and the ability to seamlessly switch between tabs and all of that stuff without having to refresh the page and reload everything and stuff like that. Well, this is possible. All I'm doing now, I'm just using the service worker. I don't remember, we are in offline mode. I can go between these pages as much as I want because the application is fully offline. I don't need the network. I can actually just use the network when I need to, as opposed to always depending on it. And this is powerful stuff, guys. Let's just quickly look at this little file of mine with just some regular JavaScript. So what's happening here is that we grab the UL on the page, the snack bar, which is the thing with the new messages you see, and just the load message button. And then we just declare if we don't find any of those, we're going to throw an error. And here's where the magic is happening. So we go to the notifications page, and or rather the notifications URL, we get the JSON, parse that JSON, we loop through all of the JSON, create list elements, and add them to the list if we find anything. And then basically what we do after that is that we apply the snackbar show CSS class to the snack bar so that it's shown. That's what's happening here. As you can see, originally it's actually been hidden down here, and then it loads, and or rather after this little timeout here, we simply apply this to we basically just show the snack bar. That's all that's happening, and when you click this little button here, it goes down. That's all the magic there is to it. So what I want you to take away from this is that everything on the page you see here is just cached assets. And in theory, the way that you would do this is that you would simply use the service worker to cache everything that you want to be cached, everything from information to static assets and so forth. And then you would load the page instantaneously, and through this method here, if you just imagine, you could actually just go to the network separately from the page loading time and get the notifications and just show that a new message saying that, hey, I found new notifications, do you want to load them into the page? That's how easy it is. And this experience, I think, is something that you're going to see more and more of. I hope that you took away something useful from this, and have a great day.